There was a man called the Elephant Man, also called a freak. His real name was Joseph Carey Merrick.
I first came across Merrick in the 80s. I knew nothing about him before that. But instantly, because he had a facial disfigurement, I knew we had something very much in common.
I'm Jonathan Evans, I'm the archivist at the Royal London Hospital and I'm manager of its museum. Well, Joseph Merrick's probably the most famous patient we've had here at the London since it opened, and we have an interesting collection of records and artefacts about him.
I remember around about the age of 7, first hearing about Merrick. As a child, I knew that Merrick lived in a museum. I knew he was dead, but I knew he was there because his body was different. I also knew that my body was different, and I had nightmares about the fact that doctors might put me in the museum. They might put me there before I was dead, and that gave me really scary nightmares.
One group over whom Joseph Merrick casts his shadow are disabled people.
Because he had a facial disfigurement, I knew we had something very much in common. We were hidden inside this mask. And I think it's so hard to show what you feel in your heart, who you really are. The face seems to say so much. Sometimes I feel really cheated by that, and I think there's not a lot I can do about it. And I'm sure Merrick felt like that, even more than me maybe, because he had less of a defined face.
This is an illustration from a medical journal, the Transactions of the Pathological Society of London, and it's an article by Frederick Trees with an illustration of Joseph Merrick. It was published in 1885, and it was the first time that Joseph's medical case had appeared in the medical press.
Merrick had a similar life to me in that sense. He was in institutions. He started off in a workhouse because he couldn't get any employment. He didn't have a home right until the end of his life almost. A home he could call his own.
Merrick could be seen as a disabled pioneer because he lived in a typical disabled person's life of impairment, surgery, unemployment, isolation, stared at, and fear of hounding.
I grew up with the myth of the Beauty and the Beast, knowing that the Beast isn't wanted, the Beast is isolated, and if you don't look right, you're automatically the Beast.
People kind of making the comments that they think you don't hear as they go past you. Ugh, that's disgusting, or God, look at that, did you see that? Of course it's a searing pain that goes right through your head. You know, certainly mentally, but it's quite a physical thing as well. And it just seems so unfair that people think that they can do that.
Merrick had that being a spectacle, being made a spectacle for him was a big thing, and it's something that still happens to me and to disabled people today. There's an element of spectacle. we sometimes spectaclize ourselves for different purposes. Sometimes we have to. Sometimes society or the world makes spectacles of us for various reasons. So that is a link. I mean, I have with Merrick, and he would have with lots of disabled people today.
I think Merrick stood out for me so much as somebody that was treated differently because of the way he looked. That's all it was about him, the way he looked.
Merrick, when we were at school, was an insult. It was like spaz, because we all read The Elephant Man and all seen the film, and we're virtually no politics. We were nasty little critters, and so it meant really disabled. It meant a freak or something, because we'd taken that on.
Joseph Merrick sometimes wore a veil, not to hide beauty, but to stop the staring from strangers.
The face is so important. It's the first impression that people have of you. And if that's masked by contortion, it's very difficult to rearrange your face, really, so that you look happy or sad, or people don't know sometimes when I'm happy or sad or when I'm unwell, because they can't read my face.
This is Joseph Merrick's hat and veil, and it was made for him, and he wore it as part of his travelling clothes. He was certainly wearing it before he came to the London hospital, and it stayed with him to the end of his life, and it's been in the hospital ever since.
And I guess it's because my face doesn't tell the story, doesn't tell my feelings. I hate it. I really hate it. I don't like people to see me cry, because my face looks horrible when I cry. Even to the point of having relationships with people, I don't like them to see my face too much.
The hat's made of felt, and the bottom, the veil, is made of linen. It's got a single eye hole, and the hat's got a peak, as you can see.
When I had long hair, I used to hide my face a lot with my hair. I used to love it. It was a security blanket. And I felt protected by it. I mean, he was literally thought of as a thing, an animal, and I mean, people actually think that now sometimes about disabled people. And I guess that he just had to hide away from it through that hood to protect himself against the harsh comments and stares.
The hat is the size of the circumference of a man's waist, and it indicates just how large Joseph's head was. It caused him great difficulty throughout his life, the overgrowth of bone and flesh on his head.
I think it's natural to be interested in difference. I mean, when I look at a picture of John Merrick, I want to know what his face feels like. I want to touch it. I want to know whether it's lumpy or squidgy or hard. I think that's natural. What I don't want to do is fear him or ridicule him, as so many seem to have done.
But what is it like to be stared at and isolated this way?
Oh, public property. I, like many other people, we're public property. We get on a bus, we're a spectacle. From the moment we open the front door, we're a spectacle. You have to be prepared for that, be prepared for the onslaught.
Well, really, whenever I go out in public, I'm stared at, I'm watched, I'm talked about without people approaching and asking questions. Often people do come up and say, "Are you okay?" or say to the person with me, is there any hope? And sometimes they'll put their hands on me and pray. And for me, that's a pretty much everyday experience.
It depends. Some days I'll go out and I'll feel full of confidence and think, sod you all, think what you like. And then other days, especially when I feel delicate and mentally, emotionally delicate, I feel that people can just stare at me as they want to and intrude upon me, and I can't get away from it.
Sometimes Joseph Merrick lived in the dark. You have to feel strong to take on the staring.
Oh, I completely understand that Merrick didn't want to come out except for at night. I went through a few years where I would only let people come to my house if it was past 10 o'clock, when the light had gone down, the light had faded, and it was dusk. And I could join the vampires and come out and play.
Joseph Merrick was given a room of his own at the London hospital, where he wrote, went to the theatre and had royal visitors.
Joseph Merrick lived at the London hospital for the last 4 years of his life, and he's become one of our most celebrated patients. This is Joseph Merrick's calling card, or carte de visite, as they were known in his day. And it was taken, it has a photograph, it was taken about 1889, shortly before his death. It shows him wearing his best Sunday suit, and he's looking quite old. His disease was an ageing disease. It was quite a nicely produced artefact, and the sort of thing that he would have given to visitors. In this instance, you can see on the back that he had given this particular example to the chaplain of the hospital, Reverend Tristram Valentine, somebody who would have seen regularly when he was at the hospital. It was later given to a medical student, Miles Phillips.
He kind of owns it. It kind of transforms him into something, the real him.
Joseph Carey Merrick's humanism did come through. Merrick left his version of a poem to be remembered by.
It is true, my form is something odd. Blaming me is blaming God. Could I create myself anew, I'm sure I would not fail in pleasing you. If I could reach from pole to pole, or grasp the ocean with a span, I'd be measured by the soul. The mind's the standard of the man.
The mind's the standard of the man.
What would disabled people say to him now if they could talk to him across time?
If I met Merrick today, but Merrick might not like me when I think about it, because he'd probably be looking for the perfect woman, so-called, you know, someone who's beautiful, and certainly without scars. I fear that that would be the case. But if he wasn't like that, even if he was like that, it wouldn't matter, but I would tell him to hold his head up high. Merrick made his mark on this planet, and it was a pretty good one. And I think he's a role model for a lot of us Crips.
Knowing that Merrick was around as a disabled person, not always hiding who he was, but being out and proud as an individual, feels as though I've got ancestry. He is my ancestor, and I am part of his family. Knowing that I'm still dealing with the issues that he was dealing with over 100 years ago makes me feel sad in some ways, but also proud. It's as though he's a forefather. He went before me, and hopefully there'll be generations like us who go after us.
Merrick's my hero, definitely. Merrick, the human being. Merrick, the guy with the mind, with the emotion. Merrick with the feeling. Merrick, quite a personality and something to be reckoned with. Merrick, the beautiful.